Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of CPL's First Chapter videos. Today we'll be reading the first chapter of The Secret Letters, which is the first book in the Mysteries of Trash and Treasure series by Margaret Peterson Haddix. It's a middle grade book, which means that we keep it in our juniors department and we have it labeled with the mystery label. This book is set in the 1970s and 80s, and it has a lot of information on a lot of social issues that were going on at the time, and it's about these two kids connecting letters and solving mysteries from a time long forgotten. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this first chapter. Mysteries of Trash and Treasure. The Secret Letters. The Beginning. If Colin hadn't found the first shoebox, nothing important would have happened that summer. He and Nevaeh never would have met. They never would have found the other shoebox. They never would have made a secret pact behind their parents' backs. They never would have solved a single mystery. They never would have... Well, it doesn't matter what else wouldn't have happened, does it? Nothing else would have happened. But Colin did find the shoebox, hidden under the floorboard in a stranger's attic, and that changed everything. Chapter 1. Colin's Summer, Day 1. Colin! Up and at 'em! Colin only bothered to open one eye, and that only to half-mast. His mother hovered over him, her grin much too wide and excited for 6 a.m. It was the first day of summer. The very first day. Mom! Colin moaned. Even that took more energy than he wanted to use. Seriously, I'm old enough to stay home by myself this year. If you're old enough for that, she countered, you're old enough to work. Mom was already snapping his blinds open. Now she was in his closet pulling a shirt off a hanger. Now she snatched a pair of shorts off from his dresser drawer. Now she had his whole outfit for the day arrayed on his chair. Colin would have actually had to roll over to see, but he was pretty sure she'd also fished his sneakers out from under the bed and lined them up beneath the chair, perfectly parallel and perfectly aimed for the door. And she'd done that all before he'd had a chance to blink. That's how Mom was, a tiny dynamo. She always moved as fast as a hummingbird. Her favorite words were lickety-split and pronto. Recently, she'd been studying French by a podcast and begun saying vite a lot too. Colin's favorite words were wait and let me think about that for a moment. Colin still didn't move. Colin, remember, Mom said. That was all it took. Because Colin did remember. He remembered how Mom had kept her head bowed, not even looking him in the eye the night she'd told him they couldn't afford the daycare program he'd gone to the past several summers. He remembered how many times he'd heard her take a call from a client and say in her bright, cheery, professional voice, "Let me step into another room to protect your privacy," and then not gotten far enough away before saying in a smaller, deflated tone that Colin could still overhear, "So you won't be needing my services after all?" He remembered that times were hard and small businesses were in trouble, and that this summer Mom just couldn't hire all the workers it would take to stay afloat. He remembered, though she hadn't quite said it in so many words, that she needed his help. Colin forced himself to sit up. He tried to stretch his mouth into an imitation of Mom's wide smile. "I am so ready to move boxes," he cried, "and clean houses, and do whatever else you want me to do. I live to work." Mom giggled. "Okay, laying it on a little thick there," she said, ruffling his dark, thick, curly hair. That was almost exactly like hers, only shorter. "But you get an A for effort. I knew it'd be fun having more time together this summer." Colin did not say, "Yeah, that's every 12-year-old kid's fantasy, to spend more time working for his mom." He was too busy staring in horror at the red shirt she'd picked out for him to wear. "A collar?" he asked. "You want me to move boxes in 90-degree heat wearing a shirt with a collar?" Mom smoothed a wrinkle Colin hadn't noticed in the shirt. "Image, remember?" she said. 99% of the reason someone would hire me instead of you-know-who is my company's image. Nobody would believe a 4'11" female is going to be best at moving boxes, if that's all it's about." Mom drew herself up to her full height, which Colin was pretty sure was only 4 foot 10 and a half, but he wasn't going to argue. He'd been taller than her since he was 9. He couldn't even remember how old he'd been the first time someone had shouted, "Wow, looks like your little boy got his height from his dad." And his mom said, "Yep," in a way that made it clear that there would be no follow-up questions. Mom didn't talk about Dad. Neither did Colin. He learned not to talk too much about Mom's business either. Way back in 2nd grade, he'd given a speech in front of the whole class about her. He'd been so proud. He'd practiced again and again just saying the name of her company, Possession Curation. In 2nd grade, he'd still had a little trouble saying S's properly. He'd memorized her company motto, "You deserve only the best," and explained how helping people get rid of things that were old and broken and useless made it so their houses were cleaner, and they had more room, and they could enjoy having nice things instead. And then the meanest kid in the class, a boy named Hunter, spoke up without even raising his hand. "He means his mom is a garbage man. Colin's mom picks up trash. She's a woman garbage man." While the other kids laughed, the teacher tried to explain that, first of all, the actual term was garbage collector, and secondly, there's nothing wrong with being a garbage man or collector, and certainly not anything wrong with a woman doing that. And anyhow, that wasn't exactly what Colin was saying, was it, Colin? Hunter had called Colin garbage boy the rest of the school year anyhow, but that wasn't even what hurt. No, what hurt was when the nicest kid in the class, a girl named Shivani, raised her hand right after that. Colin could see by the earnest look on her face that she wanted to help. Her voice was so kind when she said, "Do you mean your mom is like that guy on TV? The Junk King?" Colin had started shaking, and he'd actually shouted back at Shivani, "No, my mom is not like the Junk King. She's nothing like him at all." And then he'd run and hidden in the bathroom, because how could he have shouted at someone like Shivani? And how could anyone think Mom was like the Junk King? "Earth to Colin," Mom said now. "Where'd you go just then?" "Just thinking," Colin said. "Think and move at the same time," Mom said. She handed him a shirt and shorts. "Breakfast is in 5 minutes and I want to be out the door in 20. We've got a lot to do today." Colin was not good at thinking and moving at the same time. He wasn't particularly good at doing anything. He was best at just being. This was going to be the worst summer of his life.